So recently I decided to sit down and do something a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and that was watch an anime that wasn't battle shonen. I actually used to do that a lot, but now I run 2 separate pages about battle shonen anime, so I don't have the time anymore. But the reason that I decided that today was the day that I break out of my shell is because there is a brand new anime out there that is officially now rated as the greatest anime of all time on my anime list, which we all know is pretty much the premier place to find ratings on anime. Yes, that's right, this non-battle anime shonen with only 1 episode out is now ranked higher than Kaguya-sama Love is War and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. 30,000 votes saying an anime with 1 episode was greater than Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. But what is this anime? What was it about? What makes it so incredible that it's now considered the #1 anime of all time? Simply hearing that an anime had taken over Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I couldn't help but be legitimately curious about what was going on with this anime. Were people voting it up as a meme? Was it actually this good? I had to know. So I looked into the premise of the anime, and what I found was not what I expected. See, this anime that is now higher ranked than Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, what is considered by many to be a perfect anime and manga, was about a full-grown gynecologist who dies and comes back as the baby of the 16-year-old idol he adores. You heard that correctly. A man, full-grown, is obsessed with a 16-year-old idol. He dies, and he comes back as her baby. That's the anime that is sitting at a 9.33 on my anime list. Confused and awestruck by this series of events, I said, well, now I have to watch it. I have to determine whether or not this is a meme or whether or not somehow, some way, this anime is actually good. And ladies and gentlemen, it's one of the greatest episodes of anime I've ever seen in my entire life. And while I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that it's better than Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, we won't know that until the show's over, it does deserve a 9.33. At least. So what is this confusing, prophetic, incredible anime that we're talking about today? That would be none other than the new, recently released Oshi no Ko, also known in English as My Star. The first episode of this anime, which serves as a prologue for the rest of the anime, is 1 hour and 20 minutes long, and it is one of the most gripping, realistic, and heartfelt stories I've ever seen on a TV. But how's a story about a full-grown man who's obsessed with an underage girl and comes back as her child heartfelt, gripping, or realistic? That's what we're gonna talk about today. Because today we're doing My Star is the greatest anime ever made, and here's why you need to watch it. But before we get to talking about the greatest anime ever made, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are interested in the greatest anime ever made, then you're gonna be interested in the greatest anime podcast ever made, also known as mine, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happens in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and you better believe we talked about this show. In reality, Otaku's Anonymous is actually the reason that you guys have to thank for this video being made in the first place. I'm not assuming there's a lot of you watching this, considering this is a page built on the backs of battle shonen and not reaction content, but for those of you who are, you have Otaku's Anonymous to thank. Because the only reason I took a stab on this anime is because I wanted to be able to talk about it on my podcast. And it's thanks to that podcast that I was exposed to one of the most insane thrill ride of a stories I've ever seen in animated fashion. Don't get it twisted. The premise of this story is stupid. A 30 or so year old gynecologist is obsessed with a 16-year-old idol and comes back as her child. That's objectively dumb. And the first 10 minutes of the show are objectively dumb. It's the first 10 minutes of every isekai you've ever seen before. We're introduced to the protagonist, his life story in the real world, and why we should kind of hate him. See, in most isekai that fulfill the incel power trip, the MC is some neat that never goes outside in the regular world, until the first and final moment of heroism in their entire life stumbles upon them as they save somebody from a crosswalk and get smoked by a truck. And as they're dying, they think, well, life wasn't very much worth living anyways, but boom, they wake up in the lap of some big-breasted elven woman and now they're the most powerful character in the entire world. I call these kinds of stories incel power fantasies because objectively, they are. It's a story about somebody who usually lives a horrible and destitute life in the real world and is terrible to all the people around them, being handed a life of mystery and power outside of the confines of the oppression of the real world for the low, low cost of dying. And therefore, with most isekai, the barrier of entry is the MC finally becoming human enough that they begin to become likable, as they try to shed their more incellular attributes in the isekai world. And the beginning of My Star is genuinely no different from this. The MC isn't overbearingly awful. I mean, he's a doctor after all. For all intents and purposes, he's a pretty okay guy. And the reason that he's obsessed with this underage idol is because at one point he had a terminally ill patient. And this terminally ill patient who wasn't able to get out of bed would watch this idol perform, looking up to the way that she was able to hop around and dance on stage, and wanting to be able to do that for herself. However, this terminally ill patient passes away, and therefore the main character adopts this fanaticism for this idol whose name is I. And while this sounds like a somewhat cute premise, it's not great, because the terminally ill patient and the doctor are close. They're friends. I mean, one is a 30-year-old man and one is a 12-year-old child in a hospital, and the 12-year-old terminally ill patient wants the doctor to marry her. To which the doctor says he can't do that, she's too young, but he'll seriously consider it when she turns 16. And therefore the story is painted that after this terminally ill child dies, he projects her onto I, the idol that she loved. Which means that possibly the fanaticism that he feels towards I, the idol, is the love that he felt for the terminally ill child. Like I said, first 10 minutes, tough to get through. And it gets worse a little bit, because I, the idol, actually gets pregnant. And because she's pregnant, she has to take time away from being an idol. And do you remember what the main character of this show did? He's a gynecologist, and somehow I ends up in his hospital. At which point, they become friends. The main character not revealing the fact that he's a massive fan of her, but instead saying that the only reason he knows her is because a terminally ill girl that he used to take care of was a big fan of hers. And wow, none of this is great. This is where it starts to get better. Because when I enters the hospital, the conversation around idol culture begins. See, when I comes to the hospital, the conversation around what she's gonna do with her children takes center stage, as everybody from the main character to I's manager understands that having children as a 16-year-old idol would end her career. And more than that, it would end the agency that signed her, as the agency that allowed their 16-year-old idol to get knocked up would get mired in Japanese society, as it was their responsibility to make sure that she was protected. And the fact that everybody in the room is unilaterally in agreement that this would derail her career is insane. And it's the first real look into the hypocrisy of idol culture that we get from this show, as it's in a roundabout way acknowledging the fact that idols are a thing of worship. And the moment that they become human by either having a boyfriend or a sex scandal or even children, they're dropped like a broken toy. And the way that the show tackles this problem and how to move on from it is a masterclass in doing your homework. Obviously, I decides to have and keep her children, which she says she's not stressed about at all. Because in order to have and keep her children, all she has to do is lie to her fans. And the idea of lies runs a line through the entirety of this anime. And more specifically, your success as a public figure is directly tied to how well you can lie. See, I goes on to state that lying to her fans is nothing new. Everything that an idol does is a lie. It doesn't matter if you're depressed, devastated, or just not feeling good one day. Every single time you're in front of a fan or a camera, you have to be your happiest and cheeriest self. And the irony of I as a character is that it's revealed that she was raised in a group home and abandoned by her parents, and that to a small degree she's on the spectrum of sociopathy, not truly knowing if she's ever loved anyone before, and that she actually became an idol because of these traits. Her ability to understand what people want from her and emulate it. And she actually became an idol with the sole purpose of hoping to one day say I love you and mean it to somebody. Because being an idol in Japan revolves largely around saying how much you love your fans and how much you love production and how much you love singing. All of things that I believe she would be able to say, but all things she was lying about. So an addition of a lie about her children is nothing new. This is in a very underappreciated way a scathing review of both idol culture and entertainment as a whole, as the people that we see on our phone or TV or laptop screens have to be perfect all of the time. And any moment of humanity, if caught in the wrong light, is the end of them. The main character then goes on to die while Ai is giving birth because he gets pushed off a cliff by her stalker, which is something we'll get to later, and he's reincarnated as a baby. The show then proceeds to do more classic isekai things. There's like a whole breastfeeding scene where he's like, I can't suck on her boobs, but his sister is like, I can. because I had twins and his twin sister is also a reincarnated fan of I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it's pretty obvious you can make the guess, which is just a big old sprinkle of more isekai flavor. And you know, obviously this full-grown man in a baby's body enjoying being nuzzled up against this 16 or 17-year-old's breasts is so much fun for the viewer. But the first real problem that arises while the main character is a baby, his name is now Aquamarine, but everyone calls him Aqua, is that people have begun to see through the facade of That is to say that people already see that is a trained professional, that her smile, while there, doesn't seem to really mean anything. And begins to see all of this chatter on places like Twitter or Japanese social media apps, which really gets to her because she has no idea how to not do that. Has modeled what her face and her performances should look like based off what she's seen other people like. She's essentially done homework on idol culture and is trying to be exactly what people are looking for. But people realize that while she's doing exactly what people are looking for and therefore she's succeeding, people understand that there's no real joy behind that smile. That is until the babysitter of the twins brings the twins to one of her smaller shows. And upon seeing her twins dancing to her music, because obviously they're both mega fans, they know every song, breaks out her first real smile. And people all over the internet blow up about it, saying they were wrong about believing that she didn't actually enjoy what she did. By the way, everybody thinks that the babysitter is the mother of the two kids. That's why they were able to go to the concert. Minor plot point, but you'll see it. And this viral moment skyrockets popularity to an all-time high, with her group becoming the third largest selling group in all of Japan. And this moment's actually really cool. See, because like we already said, is on the spectrum of sociopathy. And this is really the first moment of true emotion we get from her. See, a plot point that comes up later is that never tells her kids she loves them because she's afraid that if she says she loves them, she'll realize she doesn't mean it. Much in the same way that she realizes every time she tells her fans she loves them that she doesn't mean it. Which is the irony in her name which means love in Japanese and Chinese actually. And the way that deals with this virality is that she memorizes the smile that everybody fell in love with and adjusted her face and performances to match that. And it's because of this adaptability and vision that is able to continue skyrocketing in popularity. However, her rise in popularity doesn't lead to a rise in pay. See, it's revealed that even though that she is the center, the forefront of the third biggest idol group in Japan, is only making $2,000 a month. And it's at this point that it's revealed that most idols don't make a living wage, that most idols depend on merch sales. And if their merch doesn't sell well, concerts leave them in the red. And if they're not able to break out and do solo ventures or go on to TV shows or dramas or movies, they'll never make it. It's revealed that most idols actually end up as Roppongi or Minato girls, beautiful women who are paid by businessmen to go out and drink with them, which shows us the dark reality of what many believe is to be a dream job. But fortunately, is very successful and eventually goes on to book a TV drama. And if you thought the tea was hot on the idol culture, wait until you get to the movie industry. See, goes onto the set of this TV drama and she has some minor role in a show about high school. It's at this point that Aqua and the director of this TV drama sort of become friends, mostly based on the fact that Aqua is a 2-year-old with the vocabulary of a 30-year-old doctor. Oh yeah, at this point he's just talking to people. The director, presumably confused by the fact that this 2-year-old can hold a conversation in the first place, really wants him to act for him. And throughout this conversation, the director gives us an inside view to the TV drama and movie industry in at least Japan, where he lays it out for Aqua that there's only 3 types of actors that make it. There's the big name actors with beautiful faces that pull in the numbers. There's the genuinely talented actors who act beside these actors to make sure the product is actually good. And then there's the newcomers who aren't expected to be incredible actors or actresses, but are there to bring their fans to a show. In this circumstance, is the newcomer. But the director reveals to us that these newcomers are a dime in a dozen. If people learn to like them, or their acting skills are great, or if they're so beautiful that people simply want to watch them on screen, they make it. But more often than not, especially if they're not liked on set, they're weeded out. And this is exactly kind of what happens to See, Ai's acting performance is fine. In fact, everybody says that her part was really good. But the main actress, the one who was supposed to pull in all the numbers, didn't like how good she was and how good she looked while being this good. And therefore, both her and her team mandated that the director cut out all of her parts in editing, as this actress identified that I was a threat, which gave us a look behind the curtain of the genuinely cutthroat business that is entertainment. There is only so many jobs, and actors and actresses cannot take risks if somebody appears in their niche. Any actor or actress who gets a job means there's about 3 dozen who didn't. Whether it be through luck, looks, skill, or brute force, actors and actresses and those who represent them will die on the hill of making sure that they get that job. The show isn't even done critiquing the entertainment industry, because the next scene-ish is Aqua filming a movie that he was pulled into by the director, that he only agreed to film so long as I could be in it. It's during this scene that he meets another child actress, who's well-known and beloved in Japan. She's been in multiple films and TV shows, but because of this and because of her age, she's become a tyrant to everybody around her. And through the medium of her story and her interactions with Aqua, we see the terrifying underbelly of being a child actor or actress. How the power of delusion can warp a young mind. How fame at a young age can not only stunt your growth as a human being, but stunt your career. As the director goes on to tell Aqua that what really makes an actor great is communication skills, and that those who become disliked on set lose job opportunities, and that the only way to make it in acting is either be liked or be talented. But we see genuine fear in the eyes of this little girl when she acknowledges the fact that Aqua was better in the scene they had together, as she realizes that she could be replaced like that. And this crumbles her, as the entirety of her worth is tied to her being a movie star, and that without the fame or the fortune substantiating this god complex would need to stop at a certain point. Now, this movie sends Ai into a stratosphere of fame that she didn't even believe possible prior. She's appearing on Japanese game shows, her idol group is booking domes, everything is looking up. And it's at this point that we get to the most gripping and real subject matter that this show tackles: the terrifying reality of being a public figure, especially while being a woman. Any woman whose job as a public figure is intrinsically tied to their looks walks a very delicate line. Actresses, models, singers, pop sensations, idols. Society forces all of these women to walk a fine line of being respectful enough that you don't seem tarnished, but be sexy enough that you can be objectified by your fans. And while the majority of fans might just enjoy your music or your acting performance or just think you're beautiful, some fans, and this does exist in both sides of the spectrum gender-wise, will begin to form parasocial connections. See, in a world where people's paychecks are directly tied to how much screen time they get from everybody else, those who look like me have to put out as much content as possible. And because people watch my face or Ai's face for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 12 hours a day, they'll begin to believe that they know us. And this speaks to the personability of media. Those who rise to the top of media in any sphere have to be personable. Somebody has to look at you and relate to you. And while most people relate in a healthy and comfortable manner, this isn't always the case. Parasocial relationships make things like stalking a reality. And that is what the final quarter of this episode tackles: the establishment of a personal connection that is entirely one-sided, and how this is unfortunately just a reality for any female public figure who reaches a certain level of notoriety, and how they have to navigate this kind of social minefield, as they don't want to discourage their fanatic fans and seem as though they don't care about those who love them the most, but at the same time, a level of fanaticism and objectification of them endangers their very hell. And not only does this last fourth of the episode tackle one of the realer and harder to talk about topics that is expressed throughout the entirety of this episode, but also sets up one of the stranger yet better revenge plot lines I've ever heard of. So all in all, why should you watch this show? This show tackles a myriad of real-life, under-talked about topics. It exposes the hypocrisy of idol culture in Japan, while tackling major problems that plague the entertainment industry as a whole. It is the best and most realistic representation of parasocial connections I have seen since Perfect Blue. However, if you just replace the psychological trippiness of Perfect Blue with a revenge plotline, then you get this show. It doesn't mean this show doesn't have problems. It does, in fact, rather glaring ones. See, recently a close friend of mine, Tony Weaver Jr., has been doing kind of a mini-series on TikTok, talking about the problems in isekai, and how specifically the problems with isekai are the main characters. See, Tony goes on to elaborate during this series that he believes that isekai have some of the most gorgeous and filled out worlds in any anime ever. And in this degree, he is 100% correct. Anytime you get dropped into a mythical world, I want to know everything about this mythical world. But a lot of the time, instead of diving into the side characters or filling out the deep lore of the world surrounding the main character, we just kind of get a main character who nobody should be able to relate to. The best example that I can think of is Jobless Reincarnation, which is through and through an incel's power fantasy. A man who never achieved anything while he was alive because he was a pervert who lived with his mother and treated everybody around him like shit, dies and gets to go to a new world. A world filled with rich lore, a cool power system, incredible side characters, and interesting politics. However, we have to see this world through the scope of a baby who's more obsessed with his mother's breasts and underwear than really anything else. This baby then grows up to be a tween, who after 12 episodes of supposed growth goes on to essay his own cousin, who he ends up marrying at the end. Rudy is the worst part of Jobless Reincarnation. And if hypothetically we were able to experience this isekai world without Rudy, not only could we spend more time focusing on better characters, we wouldn't have to deal with the ick that this character gives us. Unfortunately, Aqua falls into this category, though not nearly as bad as Rudy. The topics tackled in this show are incredible, and the way they're approached is a masterclass. The humor delivers, and the animation is gorgeous. But the premise was unnecessary. Did the main character need to be in love with an underage girl? Did the main character need to make a promise to a terminally ill 12-year-old that he would consider marrying her at 16, and then project that love from this terminally ill 12-year-old onto an idol that she liked? And then make everybody who's watching at home feel super icky about the fact that this 30-year-old who's now a baby is snuggled up against, well, an underage idol that he loves. Aqua is genuinely an interesting character, and as far as isekai MCs go, he's definitely not the worst. But if you, as a mangaka or a writer, is able to write a story as gorgeous as the first episode of this anime is, surely you don't need to rely on tropes like child fetishization. So while the bar to entry for Aqua becoming a human that you can root for is significantly lower than in the case of something like Jobless Reincarnation, this crutch of isekais making you grind your teeth until the main character becomes a human that's slightly likable, I think is unnecessary. And it's distracting from the story or the world you're trying to build. But everything about this show, outside of that, might as well be perfect. So I'm gonna be watching it for the rest of the season. Are you? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. This video is for sure gonna flop, but that's all right, I enjoyed making it.